Three gunshots cracked through the morning air like bones breaking. Caleb Thornton pulled hard on the reins. His horse, a dark stallion named Thunder, stopped dead on the ridge. The echo rolled across the canyon walls, then silence. The kind of silence that comes after something dies. Caleb's hand moved to the Cold Army 45 on his hip. 4 years in the Union cavalry had taught him one truth that never faded. Silence after gunfire usually means someone just stopped breathing. He was 38 years old. Gray touched his temples now. His hands carried scars from battlefields most men only read about in newspapers. Shiloh, Antietam, Gettysburg. He survived them all. Came home to find his wife gone. Run off with a railroad clerk who had soft hands and a future that didn't smell like gunpowder. She left a note. 4 words. "You're not the same." She was right. So Caleb rode west, bought a broken-down ranch outside Red Mesa, Arizona territory. The year was 1872. The land was cheap because nobody wanted to live this close to Apache country. But Caleb figured he'd seen enough death to last 3 lifetimes. He just wanted silence. Today, silence found him first, the wrong kind. He kicked Thunder forward, riding toward the sound. His Spencer repeating rifle bounced against his back. 7 shots in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. He counted ammunition the way other men counted money. The canyon opened into a clearing of red rock and scattered juniper. And there, pressed against a boulder with an arrow knocked in her bow, stood a young woman. Apache, maybe 20 years old. Her black hair hung in a braid down her back, threaded with small beads and a single hawk feather. 3 men circled her on horseback. They wore leather dusters and red bandanas around their necks. Comancheros. Caleb knew the type. Outlaws who traded guns to hostile tribes and sold captured women across the Mexican border. The worst kind of vermin the West ever produced. The leader had his pistol drawn, aimed at the girl's chest. He was laughing. "Come on, little bird," the man called out. "Chief's daughter or not, you're worth $500 in Sonora. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Caleb's blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. 8 years ago, at a place called Cold Harbor, a man named Silas Crenshaw sold information to Confederate scouts, told them exactly where Caleb's company would be camped. 32 men died in their sleep that night. Caleb survived only because he'd gone to the creek to fill his canteen. He spent 3 years hunting Silas after the war. The trail went cold in Texas. Now here he was, 50 feet away, laughing at a girl with an arrow. This wasn't about saving a stranger anymore. This was a debt written in blood. "Silas!" Caleb's voice cut through the clearing like a whip crack. "Turn around." All 3 men spun. Silas's eyes went wide with recognition. His face drained of color. "Thornton? You're supposed to be—" Caleb drew. The Colt cleared leather in less than a heartbeat. His first shot took the rider on the left through the chest. The man toppled backward off his horse before he could even reach his gun. The second shot caught the rider on the right in the throat. He made a wet, gurgling sound and slumped forward. 2 men dead in 4 seconds. Silas fired wild, the bullet splitting the air past Caleb's ear. Caleb's third shot punched through Silas's shoulder, spinning him halfway around in the saddle. The outlaw grabbed his horse's mane with his good hand, kicked hard, and bolted toward the canyon mouth. "Maddox will kill you for this, Thornton!" Silas screamed over his shoulder. "You're a dead man! Dead!" Then he was gone, dust swirling in his wake. Caleb holstered his Colt. His hands weren't shaking. They never did anymore. He turned to the Apache girl. She hadn't moved. The arrow was still nocked, now pointed directly at his heart. Her eyes were dark and deep, full of fire that hadn't been beaten out of her yet. She studied him the way a hawk studies a snake. "Why?" she asked. One word, sharp as flint. "I had business with that man," Caleb said. "You just happened to be here." She didn't lower the bow. You expect me to thank you? I expect you to do whatever keeps you alive. Something flickered in her expression. Not trust, not gratitude. Something more like recognition. Two survivors acknowledging each other across a battlefield. Her name was Ayana, daughter of a chief whose tribe had been slaughtered by Comancheros 6 months ago. She'd been running ever since. The men hunting her worked for a man named Garrett Maddox, the most dangerous outlaw between Texas and California. Caleb brought her back to his ranch, not because of anything soft in his heart, because he knew how men like Maddox operated. Anyone who helped the girl would become a target. He was already a target now. That evening, a rider appeared on the ridge, an old man on a gray horse, Tom McKenna, 55 years old, hands like leather, a face carved from desert stone. He owned the ranch 3 miles east. He and Caleb had fought together at Chickamauga, had buried friends in the same mud. Tom dismounted slowly, his bad knee giving him trouble like it always did when weather was coming. Heard shooting this morning, Tom said. You making new friends? Old enemies, Caleb replied. Silas Crenshaw. Tom's expression hardened. He remembered Cold Harbor. He remembered the 32 graves. Silas rides with Garrett Maddox now, Caleb continued, and I just shot 2 of Maddox's men. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked past Caleb to where Ayana stood near the corral, watching them with those unreadable eyes. The girl, Tom said. She's what they're after. Yeah? Tom pulled a tobacco pouch from his vest and began rolling a cigarette. His movements were slow, deliberate, the way old soldiers move when they're calculating odds. Maddox has 15 guns, maybe more by now. He's been building his outfit all winter. Recruits drifters, deserters, anyone mean enough to pull a trigger for pay. I know. You're outmanned, outgunned, and sitting on open ground. I know that too. Tom lit his cigarette, took a long drag, and let the smoke curl into the evening air. Well, he said finally, I didn't survive 3 years of war just to die of boredom on a cattle ranch. He extended his hand. Caleb took it. 2 old soldiers. One last fight. Garrett Maddox rode into Red Mesa 3 days later. He came with a dozen of his best guns. Hard men. Men with dead eyes and fast hands. They filled the main street like a dark cloud rolling over dry land. Townsfolk scattered into doorways and alleys, watching through cracked shutters. Word spread that more of his men waited in camps outside town, ready to ride at his signal. Maddox himself was a tall man, lean as a whip, with a face that looked like it had been carved from old wood and left to weather in the sun. He was 45 years old, former Confederate captain. After the war, he'd built an empire on blood and misery, guns to the Comanche, women to the brothels of Sonora. Whatever turned a profit, Maddox traded in it. He stopped his horse in front of the Silver Dollar Saloon and didn't dismount. His voice carried across the silent street like thunder before a storm. I'm looking for property that belongs to me. An Apache girl. Dark hair. Young. Someone in this town is hiding her. No one answered. Maddox smiled. It was the smile of a man who enjoyed what came next. $500 to whoever brings her to me, and for anyone protecting her. He paused, letting the silence stretch. I'll burn their house to the ground with them inside it. He turned his horse and rode back out of town. His men followed like shadows. That afternoon, Sheriff Clayton appeared at Caleb's ranch. Clayton was a complicated man. 50 years old, former prison guard at Yuma Territorial, now wearing a tin star in a town that didn't pay him enough to die for it. He wasn't corrupt exactly, but he wasn't brave either. He was the kind of man who survived by knowing which way the wind blew. Thornton, Clayton said, standing on the porch with his hat in his hands. You know why I'm here? I can guess. The town council wants the girl gone. 48 hours. After that, they're asking me to run you out. Caleb leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "And what do you want, Sheriff?" Clayton didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted past Caleb to where Ayanna stood near the barn, grooming one of the horses. She'd pushed up her sleeves in the heat. The sheriff went very still. Around both her wrists, faded but unmistakable, were the scars of shackles, the kind that come from being chained for weeks, months. The marks of someone who had been kept as property. Clayton had seen those marks before, on the prisoners at Yuma, on the slaves before the war, on human beings treated like cattle. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a spare revolver. A Remington .44. He set it on the porch railing. 48 hours, he said again. But his voice had changed, softer now, almost like an apology. Then he mounted up and rode away. Caleb picked up the revolver, checked the cylinder, fully loaded. The sheriff had just told him everything he needed to know. The next morning, Ayanna rode into Red Mesa alone. She needed salt, just a small pouch for preserving meat, nothing more. But the moment she stepped into the general store, conversations died like candles snuffed by wind. A woman grabbed her children and pulled them to the far corner. Two ranch hands stiffened as if her presence carried disease. The shopkeeper, a thick man with small eyes, stood behind the counter and didn't move. "Salt," Ayanna said, placing coins on the wood. He didn't reach for the money. "We ain't selling today." "Your sign says open." "I said we ain't selling. Not to your kind." A boy near the doorway threw a pebble at her boots and laughed. His mother didn't scold him. She smiled. Ayanna walked out without a word, her spine straight, her eyes burning. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Outside, Sheriff Clayton leaned against a post, watching. He said nothing, did nothing, just watched her mount her horse and ride away, the dust swirling behind her like a ghost. But one person moved. Martha Tillman stepped out from her small diner at the end of the street. She was 60 years old, with gray hair pinned back and hands roughened by decades of hard work. She crossed the street without hesitation and pressed a wrapped bundle into Ayanna's hands before she could ride off. Bread, fresh baked, still warm. "Don't let them break you, child," Martha whispered, her voice too low for others to hear. "Some of us remember what it's like to be unwanted. Some of us remember being hated for things we couldn't change." Ayanna looked down at the old woman. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but recognition of kindness in a place where kindness costs something. She didn't say thank you, but she remembered. She would remember for the rest of her life. That night, Caleb and Tom fortified the ranch. They dug shallow trenches behind the fence line, stacked grain sacks for cover, positioned barrels of water in case of fire. Caleb counted his ammunition twice. 47 rounds for the Spencer, 24 for the Colt, 6 for the Remington the sheriff had left. Ayanna watched them work. When Caleb told her to stay inside during the fighting, she picked up a bow from her belongings and put an arrow through an apple hanging from a tree branch 60 yards away. "I don't hide," she said. "My people died because they ran. I stand." Tom looked at Caleb. Caleb said nothing. Some arguments weren't worth having. Near midnight, a shadow moved at the edge of the property. Caleb had his rifle up before he finished his next breath. "Wait!" Ayanna's hand touched his arm. "I know him." An old man emerged from the darkness. Apache, 60 years old at least, but moving with the quiet grace of a hunting cat. His face was painted with faded war marks. His eyes were ancient and hard. His name was Crow Dog, Ayanna's uncle, the last warrior of her tribe. He had been following her for 6 months, watching from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. "They come at dawn," Crow Dog said. His English was rough but clear. 15 men, 3 groups, north, east, and the main road. "How do you know?" Caleb asked. The old warrior's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. I watched their camp, counted their horses, listened to their plans. He paused. They drink too much, talk too loud. Then Crow Dog told them something else, something that changed everything. Maddox wasn't just hunting Ayana because she had witnessed his crimes. On her back, hidden beneath her clothing, was a map, a tattoo inked into her skin when she was a child, showing the location of a Spanish gold cache her tribe had guarded for generations. Worth $50,000, maybe more. Maddox needed her alive to get the map. After that, she'd disappear into Mexico and never be seen again. This wasn't just about revenge or witnesses. This was about gold, the oldest motive in the West. Dawn came gray and cold. They hit the ranch from 3 directions, just like Crow Dog said. Maddox had brought 15 guns, more than enough to overwhelm 4 defenders. But Caleb had chosen his ground well. The first wave came from the north, 6 riders charging hard. Caleb met them from behind the grain sacks with his Spencer rifle. The first shot took the lead rider out of the saddle at 200 yards. The second and third shots dropped 2 more before they reached the fence line. The survivors scattered, seeking cover. Tom held the east side with a Henry rifle and a double-barreled shotgun. He was slower than he used to be, but his aim was still true. 3 Comancheros learned that lesson the hard way. Ayana positioned herself on the barn roof with her bow, silent, deadly. 2 men died with arrows in their throats before anyone realized where the shots were coming from. Crow Dog moved like smoke through the chaos, appearing and disappearing, his knife finding targets in the confusion. But the Comancheros kept coming. Tom took a bullet in the shoulder and dropped behind cover, cursing through clenched teeth. Crow Dog caught a round in the leg and went down hard. Caleb was running low on ammunition. 8 rounds left, then 7, then 5. Then Maddox's voice boomed across the battlefield. Enough! The shooting stopped. Maddox walked his horse forward into the open ground between the combatants, and behind him, held at gunpoint by Silas Crenshaw, was Martha Tillman, the old woman who had shown Ayana kindness when no one else would. "Come out, little bird," Maddox called. "Show yourself or the old woman dies right here." Martha's face was pale with terror, but her eyes were defiant. Even now, even with a pistol pressed against her temple. Ayana stood up on the barn roof. Caleb grabbed her arm. "No, he'll kill her. He'll kill you too, and then her anyway." Ayana looked at him. In her eyes, Caleb saw something he recognized. The weight of impossible choices. The burden of knowing that survival sometimes costs more than death. "I have another way," Caleb said. He stepped out from cover, hands raised, and walked toward Maddox. "Let her go," Caleb called out. "You want to fight? Fight me. 1-on-1. Pistols. The old way." Maddox laughed. "You're challenging me to a duel over an Apache girl and an old woman? I'm challenging you because you're a coward who hides behind hostages. Prove me wrong." The words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Maddox's smile faded. He was a proud man. Pride had kept him alive this long, built his reputation, made other men fear him. He couldn't refuse, not with his own men watching. "Fine," Maddox said. "You win. My boys ride out and never come back. I win. I take the girl, the gold, and your ranch." "Agreed." They faced each other in the dusty yard, 20 paces apart. The sun was climbing behind Maddox, putting the light in Caleb's eyes. A disadvantage. Maddox had chosen his position well. The world went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. 20 paces. Caleb felt the sun in his eyes, the weight of the colt on his hip, the rhythm of his own heartbeat. Everything else faded. The ranch, the watching men, even Ayana. In this moment, there was only the distance between 2 men and the truth that only one would walk away. Maddox stood relaxed, almost casual. His hand hung loose at his side, inches from his holster. He'd done this before, many times. You could see it in the way he breathed, the way he waited, patient, confident, a killer comfortable with killing. You know, Maddox said, I killed my first man when I was 16, lost count somewhere around 30. You're just one more number, Thornton. Caleb didn't answer. Words were for men who needed to convince themselves. He'd said everything that mattered when he stepped into the open. The seconds stretched like years. A crow called somewhere in the distance. A horse shifted nervously. Somewhere behind him, Ayanna held her breath. Maddox moved. His hand was fast. 30 years of killing had made it fast. The pistol cleared leather in a blur, the hammer already cocking as the barrel came up. Caleb drew, not faster, just cleaner. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The Colt came up smooth and level, and he fired the moment the sights found their mark. Maddox's shot came first. The bullet punched into Caleb's left shoulder, spinning him half around, pain exploding white and hot through his body. He staggered but didn't fall. His own shot was already flying. The bullet took Maddox in the gut. The outlaw staggered, looked down at the red spreading across his shirt like spilled wine, then looked up at Caleb with something like surprise. In all his years of killing, he'd never imagined dying this way, in a dusty yard, under an Arizona sun. Shot by a rancher he'd underestimated. Damn, Maddox whispered. He fell to his knees, then onto his side. The dust rose around him like a shroud. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Silas screamed, "Kill them! Kill them all!" He shoved Martha aside and raised his pistol. The remaining Comancheros followed his lead, guns coming up, fingers finding triggers. Caleb was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, in no position to fight. Tom was wounded behind the fence. Crow Dog couldn't stand. This was the end. And then the thunder came, not from the sky, from the ridge. Sheriff Clayton appeared on horseback, and behind him rode 8 men, townsfolk, ranchers, men who had watched the duel from a distance and made their choice. They had rifles raised and faces set with grim determination. "Nobody move!" Clayton's voice carried across the battlefield like the crack of doom. Garrett Maddox is wanted for murder, kidnapping, and human trafficking in 3 territories. You boys have 2 choices: drop your guns and face trial, or die right here in the dirt. Decide now. Silas looked at the armed townsman, looked at his wounded comrades, looked at Maddox bleeding out in the dust, the life draining from his eyes. The pistol fell from his hand. One by one, the other Comancheros followed, guns dropping, hands raising, the fight draining out of them like water from a cracked barrel. Clayton rode forward, dismounted, and stood over Maddox. The outlaw was still breathing, but barely. His eyes were glazing over, staring at something no one else could see. "Garrett Maddox," Clayton said, "you're under arrest." Maddox laughed. Blood bubbled at his lips. "You think this changes anything? There'll be others. Always others." "Maybe," Clayton said, "but not you. Not anymore." Maddox died with his eyes open, staring at the Arizona sky. Silas Crenshaw was among those bound for Tucson. He would hang before spring. The traitor of Cold Harbor would finally pay for the 32 men who died in their sleep. Caleb watched them load him onto a horse, hands tied behind his back, and felt something release in his chest. Not joy, not satisfaction. Just the quiet end of a debt that had followed him for 8 long years. Later, after the Comancheros had been secured and the wounded tended to, Clayton approached Caleb. The rancher was sitting on his porch, shoulder bandaged, a glass of whiskey in his good hand. "You could have told me what you were planning," Caleb said. Clayton shrugged. "Needed time. Had to wire Tucson for the warrants, convince the council that Maddox was worse than any Apache. Had to make sure that when I moved, I had enough men to finish it. And if you'd been too late, The sheriff was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Ayanna, who was helping Crow Dog wrap his wounded leg near the barn. I saw the marks on her wrists, Clayton said. I spent 15 years guarding men in cages. I know what chains do to a person. Some things... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't come easy. Some things are worth being late to your own funeral for. He tipped his hat and rode away. Martha Tillman stayed for supper that night. She sat at Caleb's table with Ayanna, Tom, and Crow Dog, eating beans and cornbread like they were family. Maybe they were now. Shared blood doesn't make family. Shared battles do. 6 months passed. The ranch healed, the way land always does after violence. Caleb rebuilt the fence. Tom's shoulder mended, though he complained about it whenever rain was coming. Crow Dog built himself a small wickiup at the edge of the property and refused to sleep indoors, claiming white man's houses made him soft. Ayanna stayed, not as a guest, not as someone being protected. She ran the horse training operation now, breaking wild mustangs with a patience and skill that made even the old Mexican vaqueros nod with respect. The gold from her tribe's cache had been recovered. She used part of it to buy her own parcel of land adjacent to Caleb's property. The rest she buried again, in a place only she knew. They didn't marry. Not in any courthouse, not in any church. But she hung a string of Apache beads above Caleb's door one morning without asking permission, and he never took them down. Some things don't need ceremonies. Some things just are. One evening, as autumn turned the desert golden red, Tom McKenna rode over with a bottle of good whiskey. The three men sat on the porch, watching Ayanna work with a young stallion in the corral. Her movements were fluid, calm. The horse responded to her like she was speaking his language. "You think you finally found peace?" Tom asked, pouring drinks. Caleb watched Ayanna for a long moment. Watched the way the setting sun caught her hair. Watched the way she moved without fear across land that had tried so hard to kill her. "Peace isn't about having no enemies," Caleb said finally. "Peace is knowing who stands beside you when the enemies come." Tom nodded slowly. "That sounds like something an old soldier would say." "That's because we are old soldiers." They drank in silence as the sun sank below the mountains. But far to the south, in a cantina in Nogales, a man was reading a letter by candlelight. He was younger than Maddox had been, maybe 35, but with the same cold eyes, the same cruel mouth, the same way of holding himself like a coiled snake. The letter was brief. It told him his brother was dead, killed by a rancher named Thornton and an Apache girl in a place called Red Mesa. The man folded the letter carefully, tucked it into his vest, and smiled. He called for another drink. Then he called for his lieutenants. The blood debt wasn't finished, not yet, but every ending is just another beginning. And in the unforgiving West, the past never stays buried for long.